Good evening. Wonderful. Everyone is on time. Do I have the permission of the speakers here to start, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Ravi Santlani, and I run a very small media platform called ScooNews, which very largely focus on K-12 education in India. As we all know that there is a nationwide debate going on since last week about the locker room story, and we decided to address that with the experts who can discuss and help teachers and parents as to how to go about it. I'm a father of a daughter and a son, and I'm myself clueless as to how do we tackle such issues. How do we make sure our children are safe and do not fall trap to such things? How do we keep an eye on them and giving them required privacy at the same time? Let's look at these experts to share the answers of these questions. Today we have 1,441 attendees to registered for this webinar and are live with us on Zoom, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Shortly, we will share all the links on the chat screen in Zoom and of course on Facebook and YouTube. I request all of you attendees to share this widely on your Facebook timeline so that all your peers who are not here today could also refer to it later. We have these esteemed set of speakers here who otherwise are not very reachable and approachable. So I think let's make the most out of this particular session. And as you all know, that today's topic is unlocking the locker room. And I'm hoping it proves out to be a proactive and solution-based conversation on achieving an attitude shift in the generation. And to brainstorm on the same, we have with us Anju Kish, who's going to chair today's panel. She's sexuality educator and founder Untaboo Education, a double graduate in law and mass communication, an award-winning sexuality educator, a TEDx speaker, an author, a blogger, and columnist. She's also the producer of the only play on puberty and safety in India, a stand-up comic, and I've been a witness to it a couple of months back in Mumbai, and Anju, you were outstanding. All of this in the space of sexuality and safety education. Her book on sex education for children, How I Got My Belly Button, bagged FICCI's Best Children Book Special Jury Award this year. Anju has touched the lives of more than 1 lakh children, parents, teachers, and schools across the country and impacting more every single day. I've seen her also speaking in a few schools, and a lot of school owners are here today. Please reach out to her as and when things get normal. You gotta have Anju in your school addressing all these students. And I'm sure, she will perform and outperform. So we also have Dr. Swati Popat Vats, who is the founder president of Early Childhood Association India, an association that works for quality care and education of our youngest citizen, that is 0 to 6 years. She's also the president of Association for Primary Education and Research. Dr. Vats is also serving as the president of Podar Education Network, and she leads over 498 preschools and daycares as founder director of Podar Jammu Kish. We have Dr. Zirak Marker, who doesn't look any less than a Bollywood superstar. He is child and adolescent psychiatrist and is also advisor at Empower. Dr. Marker is a renowned child and adolescent psychiatrist and psychotherapist with clinical training at the Westchester Medical Center, New York University. He currently serves as medical director of the Aditya Birla Integrated School and is advisor and senior psychiatrist for Empower. He is also a youth mental health first aider accredited by Mental Health First Aid MHFA Australia. He has authored a book, Parenting in the Age of Anxiety, which is a unique publication covering topics such as bullying, abuse, adoption, academic stress, disabilities, and death, amongst other hard-hitting parental concerns. We have our youngest speaker, Varun Gupta, who's a student at Jamnabai International School. He's a graduate from Jamnabai Nursery International School, Mumbai, and is entrant to Wheaton College, MA on Trustee Scholarship for the 2020 intake. An avid Eminer, he was the winner of the Harvard Model Congress and president for International Youth Conference 2019. He's also a sports person and plays football at the national and international level. A very, very warm welcome to you all. And before you, Anju, I'd like to request all the attendees to please type in your questions only in the Q&A section, and the speakers will try to answer a few if time allows. And for those of you just joining in, welcome and enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Anju.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for partnering with Untaboo on this and taking the lead in it. Thank you, viewers, for logging in, and thank you, Swati, Zirak, and Varun, for agreeing to come on board at such a short notice. Now, obviously, the boys' locker room, as Ravi mentioned, has created a massive outrage. And when this news broke, the media went into a complete frenzy. The parent WhatsApp group went into an overdrive. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a finger to point. Now, while we were all processing this news, there came news of a similar girls' locker room. Comments and finger pointing started all over again. The discussion today is not about the boys or girls' locker room incident. In fact, as parents and educators, we have to be cognizant of the fact that these incidents are just a reference point. This may happen in our schools, our children's schools, our homes, across the generation. So let's not distance ourselves by saying, not my child, not my school. It is happening all around. What's important to establish here is that the behavior is not just of males to females. This is about how we are raising a generation and not a particular gender. I, like everyone else, was of course disturbed when news incidents like these happen, but feel that instead of finger pointing, it's time to have more nuanced conversations. It's about discouraging knee-jerk reactions and coming together as a society and as experts to ideate on systematic solutions. So Zirak, my first question to you would be that as a mental health professional, how do you react when news of such incidents occur? Do you immediately start judging, or your concern immediately is about the parties involved and their mental health at this stage of point of state?
Sure. Hi, Anju. So you're right. I mean, when these things hit us as news, I think it does unravel a lot of questions in our minds. But I think what comes to me first, especially since I've been in this field for now almost about 19 years, is that we are all victims here. If you look at it from a wider and a broader perspective, whether you look at your three main stakeholders, right, which are parents, children, and educational institutes, like I said, we all are somewhere victims in all of this. And, as we have to also remember that these are all children, right? They are all children, and they all sometimes get, wrongly vindicated and blamed. There are fingers pointing out to either children or parents. Sometimes the media sensationalizes a lot of news on social media or online or newspapers, and absolutely disregarding the privacy and the reporting aspects of sensitivity. And I think what comes to my mind first is that we all have to be in this together collectively, take actionable, measures and steps. But I think we have to do it with psychological mindedness, with intelligence, and with unity, where all these three stakeholders come together to find, clear solutions driven forward. And I'm all for disciplinary measures, yes, but at what cost, and exactly where are those disciplinary measures needed? Because like I started off saying, is that we are all victims. We have to look deep within ourselves as parents. Schools and colleges need to look into their curricula and understand the ethos and the philosophies they are propagating, and then the larger culture of children, and empowering them, and how we need to empower them so that we prevent issues like this from happening.
Absolutely right. And I think the first thing we should do is stop the media trial and the social media trial, because the kind of impact it can have on all parties concerned can be absolutely disastrous. We have a youth representative here in the form of Varun. And Varun, we are very eagerly waiting to hear your perspective. Now, I'm sure when incidents like these happen, there are a lot of discussion in your friends groups. So what is the general take on issues like this when it happens?
Hi, good evening. So basically what I felt is that an incident like this, it changes the way our generation experiences life, doesn't it? Because I feel that at my age, it becomes a sort of trend to party with your friends till 2 a.m. on certain nights, maybe once or twice a month. But knowing such an incident can occur in broad daylight, it instills a certain amount of fear amongst us youngsters. And then past that point doesn't even become about the fact of whether our friends are allowed to come out or whether our parents are fine with us going, but we ourselves don't want to stay out till such late hours because we ourselves don't feel as if it's safe to do so. And talking to my friends more than us boys, I feel it has a greater impact on the girls as well, because now not only are they restricted from staying out till 2 a.m. in the morning, hanging out with friends, even if what they're doing is harmless, but they're also restricted to the way they can dress or the way they interact with people, because a common mindset is that it's the girl's fault because the way she dressed and the way she spoke to somebody. But she should be allowed to express herself however she wants to. But if such cases happen and they happen again and again, it just affects that, and it does not give them the freedom they should be granted.
Absolutely. So basically, it's a knee-jerk reaction that we all have. Parents become more stricter. They are, don't allow their daughters to be on social media or go out late at nights. Even don't allow their sons to be on social media or up till late night. So these are just temporary reactions. Human memory is very frail. We forget soon, and we go back to our life till again another incident happens.
Right.
Swati, like we were talking earlier, I was mentioning that there's a lot of blame game which begins when an incident like this happens. Parents are blamed. The schools are the first to be blamed. The parents' upbringing is questioned. Girls' attires are blamed. Media exposure is blamed. When can we stop this blame game and start taking the onus of changing things? And who should be taking this onus?
A very valid question, Anju. First, it's very important for us to understand what is wrong in these incidents, whether it was the Mumbai incident or the Delhi incident or any future incidents that will happen. See, we all grew up curious about sex and everything related to sex. We've all gone through this stage. You know, adolescence is a stage at which there is fear and awe about sex. It's mixed together. They want to experiment. They look at it as a risk, okay, let's try this and what will happen. Everybody, when we were growing up, we dabbled with bad words. We liked a boy or a girl. And we also indulged in light porn. For us, light porn was kissing on the mouth. We used to go to see English movies only for that.
Or Mills and Boon books for that matter.
Yeah, Mills and Boons, exactly. But my whole anger is towards the fact in both these incidents is not about the teasing of the girls or the boys, is about sex being used as power, sex being used as bullying, and rape being acceptable and aspiring for it. That is what is the problem out here. So when we talk about onus, the onus lies on both the schools and the parents that they have not drawn their boundaries correctly. We are, when we go into a knee-jerk reaction, we tell children, don't look at this and don't do that. Right. You need to understand at that age, there will be a certain amount of experimentation which should be allowed. It's okay. You should be knowing about it. Number two, you cannot and should not accept rape as something commonplace, as something to be lightly discussed about, or something that you want to do. That's what has come in these conversations. And that is what my anger is towards. That didn't these parents bring up their children to understand that rape is bad? You know, there is a difference in Hindi in two words. One is called gunda and one is called mawali. You know, a mawali is the one who stands and whistles and leers at women. A gunda is the one who actually commits the rape. So you should be able to make this distinction in children's minds as they are growing up. Rape at any point, however rich or poor or elite you are, cannot be acceptable. It just cannot be acceptable. And I am shocked and ashamed at how lightly these children are using the word rape. And that is where the onus lies on us as schools and on us as parents. Have you drawn your boundaries, and are you making your children stick to those boundaries? See, for us, it's all about respect. Our generation used to respect our parents. You know, there was almost a kind of reverence in the way we used to respect. And that respect was underlined with a little bit of fear, Anju. We know that if our parents caught us doing something wrong, we would fall in their eyes. And that was unacceptable to us. And so even when our parents were not present, We still don't do those things. I'm 53 years old. I still don't do a lot of things that my parents did not like. So it's that which we have not instilled in this generation, you know, that respect for my parents, the respect for my school, and that starts from early years. It just doesn't start when the child becomes a teenager. So when we talk about boundaries, boundaries start from early years. Then there are different boundaries for childhood, and then there are different boundaries for adolescence. But I must understand the concept of boundaries right from early childhood. So that is where the onus of schools and parents lies.
Absolutely. Like you rightly said, that the word rape is being used so loosely by the youngsters. And a little later, I'm going to bring Varun to comment on this bit. But now that we're talking, you've spoken about the onus being shared by the school and the parents. Mostly at UNTABOO, we've seen that both the schools and the parents don't feel the need for sex education unless there's a case like this, and then calls to our office increase. Unless they've seen their child watching porn in the history, they've come across porn in their child's computer, or an abuse incident happens. So these are the triggers which lead them to understand that sex education is necessary. How can we make it, that it has to be a part of child's education? Just like reading and writing is so important, sex education is equally important. So how can we start to get parents to start these conversations themselves, or hire an expert without the trigger like this, or even for schools to take on this onus?
Question for me?
Yes, Swati. I would like to know, you being an educationist, why aren't schools taking the lead in this? A lot of schools are, and we really appreciate that. But even the government took an initiative, but it is not being accepted so readily. So what is the problem here? What are your recommendations for schools and for parents in general?
I tell you, Anju, about 15 years back, I started Good Touch, Bad Touch for the toddlers.
Yes.
And there was a lot of hoo-ha at that time. Parents were saying, oh, you want us to teach good touch, bad touch. Then a lot of NGOs and everybody joined the bandwagon and said, say appropriate and inappropriate. And my stand was always that young toddlers don't know the word appropriate. We are always saying bad boy and good boy. So it's good and bad that they will understand, because I'm talking about 2 years old and 3 years olds. So it is about taking an initiative and then sticking to it as a school and explaining it to parents. A lot of schools bow down to parents' criticisms and feel, oh, my parents don't like it, so I'm not going to do it. So we took a stand 15 years back and we said, no, we will have GTBT sessions for our little toddlers. And after 15 years now, parents are appreciating it, that you kept our children safe. Number two, I have written in my blog also, please don't call it sex education, because India has a problem with the word sex. We as parents don't want our children to learn about sex. Call it gender education, call it body management, whatever you call it. It's the word sex that parents have a problem with. So you will have to ease them into it. You will have to make the parents comfortable that what you are talking about is not you're not going to be talking about porn and things like that, because they are misunderstanding this. They think sex education, oh my God, is my child ready for it? So
absolutely, Swati. In fact, we face that all the time when we say we are a sex education company.
Yes.
The word sex gets completely magnified, and the most important word, education, which is right next to it, becomes invisible. So they naturally assume that sex education is a talk on sex, whereas sexuality education is such a vast field. So if you're talking about your bodies, relationships, consent, responsibility, empathy, all of this is sex education.
You know what, Anju, your book should be converted into a curriculum. If I were you, I would convert that book into a curriculum.
Thank you.
Because you have highlighted a lot of things that students use, bad words that they use, and they don't understand how did these words originate, etc. So I think when you, because I like the title of your book,
It got my belly button.
It doesn't tell you sex in its title.
Right.
You saw that? That's the problem with our sex education module in the schools. It should not have sex in the title. And then and only then will parents accept it. Maybe 20 years from now, Varun's generation will accept it for their children when you say sex education. But this generation is not ready for a topic called sex education.
All right. So if we change it from sex education to something else, body literacy, gender literacy, whatever, you think schools will be open to it?
I think so.
My question is, what stops the school from taking on this onus?
As I told you, embarrassment. When you say sex education and a teacher is given that topic, now go and teach the 8th and 9th standard children about sex education. And what does she introduce herself as to the class? Oh, wow, today we have a first session on sex education. She herself stumbles with that word. So it's very important when you give it a word like literacy, body literacy, it makes sense. I'll tell you, when we were in 9th standard, Johnson & Johnson had come to talk to us about menstruation, you know, and they did it so brilliantly that we were not feeling embarrassed, and nor were our parents. So it's very, very important that if you want to bring these topics out in the open and make people comfortable with them, take away that embarrassing factor.
Right. I believe that this is an education which should start very, very early on in life, right from the point you start teaching your child the names of their body parts. You should include the names of the genitals in this. Zirak, my question to you here would be, where does all these incidents that we see across the board now, it's a lot to do with objectification, both male and female. There's toxic masculinity we see around us. Where does this stem from, and how do we nip it in the bud?
Sure. So, I look at this as a two-pronged approach. I think we are living in the age of what I call as snow plowing parenting. I don't know if you have heard of this term or not. It's a new term, but it's what a lot of Generation X and Z children go through. And I've seen that so often because I run a school myself and in my clinical practice. So snow plowing parenting are the new breed of parents that basically will kind of, try and remove all obstacles or troubles or hurdles away from their children's path and, provide them with no consequences, in order to try and shield them and protect them. But what they don't realize is that when children are born of this parenting style and they don't face certain consequences in life, they have no independent thinking skills. They are more prone to peer pressure. And therefore, you see cases like this multiplying. They are forced to sometimes conform because they don't have those independent judgment skills and thinking skills. And therefore, they have poor judgment and insight, which then also leads to poor empathy and high frustration tolerances and low empathy. Now, when you have all these aspects into play, and like you rightly said, education, I don't even use the word sex education at all. In fact, I'll get into that subsequently. But parenting, I feel, really, really plays a very deep role in who your child's personality is going to be. Yes, there's a whole debate about nature and nurture, but I always feel that, yes, genetics and nurturing play a huge role. But how you nurture your child, right? As you said, right from the time the child is born, the kind of messages you give your kids. And sometimes when you hear parents, even in their conversations to their kids, it's so stereotypical. Like recently, I've heard this statement which really bothers me is, oh, boys will always be boys, for example. Parents have been brought into school for, say, whatever the behaviors may be. It could be a mild conduct issue or something that they've done wrong on social media or a comment or bullying. And the first response for the parent in these days is to be on defense mode. Now, when you're sitting there across the parent, across the child, and you're seeing that the parent is, like guarded and not, in cognizance of the child's aspects, there is where it's the start of the end. That's where you see lots of issues. And who's talking to kids? If you think about it, who is talking to children about sexual orientations? Who's talking to children about compassion and empathy? Who is having discussions about them with regards to respect of women, boundaries, the very, very important terms of consent, for example, there are teenagers in the school who haven't heard, or the term consent and boundaries has not even been discussed. Who's discussing gender equality? Who's going into details about acceptance and tolerance, no matter where you come from, which socio-economical background, caste, religion, gender, or sexuality you belong to? Who's teaching them how to be more tolerant and acceptance of these differences in societies that we live in? We are not talking about sexual harassment or the laws and these boundaries with our kids. And of course, like you rightly said, the whole sex education aspect. So I look at it as, I don't even use, like you rightly both said, the word sex education now is passé. What we have actually implemented and run as a 2-year pilot is a mental health curriculum in schools. And we've actually seen changes. We've had kids who've, whether it's small amounts of bullying to harassment to sexual undertones to things that kids are bodies, peer pressure, bullying, they completely have a different set of mind, a different way of looking at things. So that's when I feel if parenting can evolve and change, and parents realize the damage that this kind of parenting can have, and if schools get together and impart a very, very robust mental health curriculum into schools, starting from grades 1 to grades 12. And I always tell this to all schools, and I joke with principals and trustees that it's okay if kids get one less lecture in math or science and EVS. But if every kid once a week gets a curriculum that teaches our kids compassion, respect, kindness, and all the above topics that I mentioned, we are looking at a far better evolved society with our next generation.
Absolutely right, Zirak. In fact, this education, whatever you choose to call it, whether mental wellness or just education, body literacy, whatever term we give it, it has to be continuous. It has to be year-on-year education. Only then things will change. We have sometimes, in our workshop, I remember one boy had once mentioned that he had declared to me that, ma'am, do you know that girls like to be hit while having sex? Now, where is this coming from? Obviously, attitudes are being defined from what they are watching. Their sex educator is pornography. So the source of information makes all the difference. Now, if parents and schools can become this source of information, attitudes will definitely change.
Absolutely.
Also, Zirak, there's one point I want to raise here is that we are talking about this generation, the kind of exposure they have, the kind of content they consume. But what about men? A lot of men I know do have separate boys groups, so to say, on social media, where they share porn clips, where they share vulgar jokes. So how different are they from these boys? Objectification is happening even over there, whether offline or online. So where do we draw the line?
You're talking about young adults, Anju?
I'm talking about young adults. I'm talking about old adults.
Yeah. So
it's across the generations.
Of course. And I think, see, again, like I started off saying that, when I use the word, we're all victims in here. So it is mindsets that do pass on from generation to generation, right? Now, when you have the aspect, when I use the word mindset, there are so many cultural differences, right? I mean, for example, we don't believe in a culture of drinking with our kids, whereas in France, they will sit on a dining table and have wine with their kids, even as young as 9 and 10 years of age sometimes. So what I'm getting at is, it is also the mindset about what is permissible and not, what is acceptable and not. And whether, like I said, it's not just the sexuality bit or the sex education bit, it's the acceptance and tolerance across all aspects. So when you have a mindset of a parent, maybe he was brought up or she was brought up in a way where the same messages weren't given. So what I'm talking about is generation, like if you look at discrimination and lack of acceptance across religion, or bias against skin color, or bias against tolerance of multiple other aspects, it does come down from generation to generation. I mean, how many of us have heard this statement from our grandparents that, oh, when you grow up, you must marry someone who's tall, dark, and handsome for a man, or pretty and fair for a girl. Right. Now, when you discuss all these things with kids, it's remarkable at their age and as young adults, how they love questioning these beliefs. So that's what I started saying, that you have to start healthy conversations. And as you rightly said, sometimes it is the mindset of the parent that may be wrong. So as you said, it could be a father who's perhaps permissible and okay with extramarital affairs to pornography to all sorts of other deviances. But then if we can start molding the child in school, for example, starting from grade 1, where a counselor becomes the teacher, gets into the classroom and starts having these healthy conversations. And when you do that, you're destigmatizing mental health, you're normalizing vocabulary, you're normalizing these conversations so that they can be healthily had with a professional. So it's not like you're just randomly surfing the internet to get answers for yourselves in your mind. You're actually, you're given a safe space in your own school, in your own classroom to have these discussions. And like I said, we've seen it happening and it's amazing. I mean, kids who've, for example, about 3 months back, there was a kid who'd never told a soul about his sexuality. He, in one of these classes that we've conducted, has stood up and come out and expressed his sexuality. We've had kids who've been sexually abused when they were very young, and when we've had these healthy discussions and they've realized it's safe, it's secure, and we've normalized this for them and taken away that guilt and shame, they've actually opened up and shared these stories with us. And like I said, it's not happened at home, it's not happened with their parents. So that's where
very surprising, Zirak. We face that all the time, that children share with us stories of abuse and they've not shared it with the parents who have been having these conversations with them. So that's quite another discussion possibly on that. But I'm going to bring in the young lad Varun here. Varun, a lot of doubts are being raised on the fact that kids who go wrong, it is the parenting responsible. Doubts are being raised about the upbringing of the child. Do you think that's a valid doubt? Do you think the youth themselves have no responsibility here?
So I believe that a child can be brought up in two ways. One would be by his or her parents, and the second could be by the internet. And
that's a beautiful statement, Varun.
Thank you.
A very, very deep statement, actually. I would really want you to repeat that. It's a wonderful statement. It's a quote.
Yeah. So there are two ways a child can be brought up. One by his parents and one by the internet. And the fact is that if a child is brought up by his parents, he or her always has someone who he can confide in, someone who, when in doubt, he can ask questions. And even if it's something as simple as a misconception, there's always someone who has 40 or 50 years more of experience to tell him what's right and what's wrong. However, if you look at the second way of a child being brought up, and I believe I'm speaking out of experience because I've noticed in my generation that there are many children who are completely dependent on the internet. And the fact is that today the internet's become such a wide platform that people don't upload the correct answers and they do not upload videos which teach you things, but they upload videos which get the most views, videos which will be the most popular ones and which will make them the most money. And due to this, when a child looks up on the internet for a sensitive topic such as sex or rape, they do not find correct answers. They do not find humane answers. They find answers which entertain people. And because they have no role model to look up to, when they look at these inhumane answers, which are just for views, they feel that that is the correct thing to do. And such children probably don't have a role model outside the house as well. And due to this is what they tell their friends, and they spread this word around their small community. And due to this, when you come back to the premise of the question as to whether it's the child's fault, yes, of course it is. But how is a child supposed to tell wrong from right when he's brought up with the mindset of what he's doing is correct? He himself does not know what he's doing is wrong. And that's why I feel it's our generation and the educated half of the generation's responsibility to inform people about right from wrong. I mean, if you look up on the internet, even my friends, there are so many songs and so many shows which unintentionally promote such wrongdoings. This is no specific example, but just because it's in my mind, I'm going to say it. It's a song called ABCD, which is a very famous song. And the song talks about friends partying and having a good time. However, yet there's a line in the song which states, and I quote, "Kudiyo ka laga hai buffet, chahe jo kar le choose," which, if translated into English, means there's a buffet of girls and choose the one you want, which makes children of today think that it's their choice which make especially the boy think that it's their choice and they can choose whoever they want, which is absolutely incorrect. And I feel that if there's no role model in his or her life to correct this misconception, even though it is the child's fault, he has committed a crime which he did not know was incorrect to do in the first place.
That's a very strong point you brought across, Varun, that when you're being raised by the internet, your role models become what you see on the internet. In fact, I'm going to share a very scary statistics, and this is from India, a research which says that 80% of college boys watch porn. Out of the 80%, 40% watch rape porn, and these are real rape videos. And out of that 40%, 60% admitted that when they watch these rape videos, they feel like raping a girl. Zirak, I would like you to comment on this phenomenon. Does what they see, how does it impact their mind? Do they actually feel like going and playing out that situation, what they've been seeing?
Sure. You see, what one doesn't realize is that all children, and I'm talking of now, let's look at adolescents going into teenage life and then young adults, right? They say that the brain is yet not developed. Now, when you look at, we always question, right, why teenagers are so impulsive and moody. They don't have social judgment. They kind of, they find it difficult to say no. They are more prone to, influence and peer pressure. That's because all these, adjectives I just used and all these functions I just used are part of the frontal lobe, which creates the judgment, the moral understanding, and the decision making in adults. Right. Now, take a guess as to when this development ends. So what I'm trying to say is that the brain keeps on wiring and molding neurophysiologically, and they say that this molding or neuroplasticity ends at age 21. So imagine
Zirak, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd heard that the legal age for drinking was extended to 25 because this frontal cortex actually develops till age 25.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. So when you have such impressionable minds, now I'm giving a medical and a neurochemical and a neurophysiological reason why perhaps teenagers are the way they are, right? That's because, like I said, the brain and the mindset, even neurophysiologically, is not prepared or ready to receive this kind of, mindsets, informations. And as Varun rightly put it, the whole internet access gives you such wrong messages sometimes. And imagine when you're predisposed, imagine that you are anyways going through, say, loneliness, isolation, you're being bullied in school, you're going through kind of, mild problems with, say, depression and anxiety. When you're turning to the internet, it's even more horrifying what you find over there. I mean, to add what Varun said is, there's a large community out there, imagine, that trains and videos and explains to other teenagers how to cut themselves when they are in pain. Now imagine how perverse that is and how sad that is, and how many kids I know who are on it. So that's how the influence can be that strong, that can be that damaging. So as you rightly said, Varun, I mean, that's a huge, role modeling from parents plays a very big impact. And that's why I again reiterate that sometimes you may not have a healthy role model in a parent or from parents or the family. Therefore, that's why I keep emphasizing the importance of educational institutes and schools that can help bring back that balance.
I'm going to go back to Varun with a question on role models. Varun, a lot of your generation have YouTubers as role models. You'll follow them, but a lot of YouTubers use a lot of obscene language. Also, in the shows that you watch, well, the one top of mind is Games of Thrones. There's a lot of nudity involved. There's a lot of incest there. There's sexual violence there. How do you deal with all of this? Does it desensitize you? Does it normalize it for you? What do you feel about it? Do you think it's cool to do all these things? Do you use the language that YouTubers are using, the slang words?
So if looked at all the content which includes nudity or abusive language is for children who are 18 and above. And that's why even when you log into YouTube, they first ask you, are you 18 and above? And please provide proof. But the problem is that today, it's become so easy to put a fake birthday and enter that even a 5-year-old can access a video which is meant for a 26-year-old. And due to this, I feel one way to prevent it is to implement some laws to prevent the social media from being so widely available to everybody. But coming back to the question about how this affects us, the fact is that there are many popular YouTubers, and the first Indian YouTubers that come to mind are Ashish Chanchlani and AIB, which are very popular right now. And the fact is that over time, we'll notice that each YouTuber puts a disclaimer before the video because of the amount of young audience they're receiving. However, the fact is that all of us love their videos and we all laugh at it. And it's no, I'm not denying it. Even I watch their videos and I enjoy it. But the fact is that because these videos and these movies are so popular, children start to feel that that is the correct way to behave in order to gain attention from your friends. And that is the correct way to behave and talk to others in order to be cool. And because of this, that's how children start behaving amongst their peers. And when children start adapting these behaviors from movies, shows, and YouTubers in real life, they start becoming those people. But what we don't notice is that these YouTubers and these people acting in movies, they are actors. They aren't represent, the role they play in these videos isn't a representation of who they are as people. And that's what the youth doesn't understand.
And
And
that's where I think the role of parents comes in.
yes, because I feel
The
the parents
parents
don't
or even
explain
schools
to
for
them.
that matter, of making them understand that what they are seeing is not reality. And I guess everybody sees shows like this, but if you're watching it with the knowledge that what they're seeing is not reality, it is not something to be emulated, then after a certain age, I guess it is okay. Swati, I'm going to come back to you. You, of course, work with very young children, and foul language is starting very early on today. How do you deal with it? What are some tips you'd like to share with parents?
See, it's very important for us at the early childhood level to be able to correct children sensitively. We don't blame the child. We ensure that the child understands that the behavior was bad and needs to be modified. And if this is carried forward in all age groups, rather than shaming a child or punishing the child, make the child understand what was said or what was done was wrong. I'll give you an example of something that happened a few years back in one of our schools. We had a lot of high-end parents attending that school, and they would kiss their children on the mouth while saying goodbye. And what happened is in the classroom that the children started kissing each other on their mouths. Now, can you imagine 4-year-olds doing that? When the teacher tried to bring it to the attention of the parent that please don't do this to your child, because your child is then doing it to other children, because many other parents had complained. This parent got so agitated and told the teacher, you are nobody to tell me what to do with my child. I have every right to kiss my child on the mouth. So much so that we had to come out with a video. It's a Muppet video called Lip Locking. It's available on YouTube, in which we've shown what are the bad effects when you kiss a very young toddler on the mouth, and how it affects them in so many different ways, and how they will repeat this behavior with their peers without understanding what is right and wrong. So we made it a rule in the school. So this is how behavior needs to be nipped in the bud by involving the parents and ensuring that the child doesn't feel that the child was bad, but only that the behavior needed modification. I won't even say that the behavior was bad. The behavior was wrong. And that's why you need to understand. You know, there are these lovely Disney cartoons that we bring up children with. You have Pinocchio, in which there is a song that when you don't know right from wrong, give a little whistle. So what's that whistle? That whistle is a conscience. And that's the conscience that you have to develop in very young children by giving them the right support at the right time between understanding right and wrong.
And the parent can become that conscience also.
Zirak mentioned about consent, and consent is such an important part.
Yes.
Very young toddlers, we just pick them up without telling them that I'm going to pick you up. Or we just start removing their clothes when we are changing them without telling them what you are going to do. Consent starts from those very simple things. And I must say, Varun is like an oak tree, strong, solid. How did it happen? How did this oak tree grow? It had both to contribute, the parents and the school.
Yes.
We have a lot of questions coming up. I'm moving slightly away from the toddlers and the consent that we have to teach them, which is a very valid point you raised, Swati. And there's a questions coming up about how do I teach my 14-year-old what he discusses with his friends? Do I have a right to invade his privacy? Varun, that's something I wanted to ask you, that you said that you want the parents to be involved. How involved is involved? Would you be okay to share your phone password with your parent? Would you be okay if they checked your phone or your social media? Because a lot of stuff is happening on the social media, and parents are not as technologically advanced as the kids are. So what is the kind of freedom you'd give your parents to check up on you?
So I'd like to start by saying I personally would not mind if my parents were to check my phone. But I'd also like to answer the question as to whether parents should force their children to provide them with their social medias and their phone passwords by saying no, absolutely not, because that is a child's personal platform. And to put this in a real life situation, just for explanation purposes, I feel I can use a sports metaphor because every boxer has a coach, and this coach trains the athlete every day, telling him or her what to do, how to do, and when to do it. However, when it comes to the fight night, it's all up to the athlete. And my point is that every single second you spend with your child is like every single second a boxer spends training. And you have to prepare your child for any punches that life will throw his or her way. So while I feel that parents do not need to be 100% involved in a child's life, they should always be there by the sidelines supporting them. And what I mean is that they should make their child feel as if they can confide in them, so that even if it's not the child's fault, but they're in a tricky situation, they should feel comfortable going up to their parent and saying, listen, this has happened. What should I do? I don't know. And
It's a good point, Varun, but in reality, I'm sure all parents want to have this kind of relationship with their children, but things change when the kids hit adolescence. Suddenly, friends become more important. Obviously, peer pressure increases from that, and a lot of things stem from there. So even if your parents trust you, they feel you share everything with them, there are still things youngsters don't share with their parents.
definitely,
However open a relationship you have with your child, because for you, your peers become more important, what they think become more important. How do you tackle this? Zirak, I'm going to ask you this. And in the case that we earlier spoke about, the boys' locker room, the bystander effect, as we would call it.
Yeah.
A lot of youngsters fall prey to this. So can you just explain that in brief, what this is, and how kids can cope with this bystander effect?
So first of all, Varun, I just love the way you speak. I think I should have you in every school giving motivational talks to kids your age. Genuinely, it's just brilliant to understand
You know
at
what?
such a
I
young
was
age.
just thinking that Varun should be taking this so-called sex education. It's teenagers like him should be talking to the other children younger than him.
Can
Because you're hired at Untitled.
can I please stop you all? He's my keynote speaker. I'm not going to let any one of you snatch him. Brilliant. Bravo. Bravo. I mean, this is amazing. Please continue, Zirak.
Yeah. So basically, what I loved what Varun said, and to add to that, and as what Anju is tough. I get the whole dilemma of privacy, where to draw the boundaries, even between a teenager and a parent.
Yeah.
I believe in this line, which I love. And I know a lot of kids like Varun who, when they come privately to talk to me about even their love affairs or whatever private issues they have, and they're not sharing it with their parents, they're coming and sharing it with through counseling. But what I love them saying is that my mom and dad are the inner voice in my head. So yes, you don't have to be spying on your child's phone all the time or sitting behind him when he's in front of a screen. You just have to hope and pray with intuitive, powerful parenting that you've done your job right. As he rightly said, you have to be that coach, you have to be that solid person beside your kid, in a balanced way. You cannot be a helicopter parenting or a snow plowing parenting or someone in your face all the time, because that is going to erode into your relationship as a teenager with the parent. But you have to be in the sidelines, as Varun put beautifully. And like I said, eventually the whole aspect of parenting is to be the more or less perfect role model. It's how you treat people. It's how you have conversations. Like, sometime back, I mean, just a quick anecdote, my 7-year-old saw, we were traveling abroad and they saw two men kissing, and they looked at them and they looked back at us and asked, why two men were kissing. And in the beginning, me and my wife didn't know how to immediately respond to that. But then we did, and we did it immediately saying, that's fine. It is absolutely normal. But for example, how a man and a woman can kiss and how a man and woman can normally get married, it is also normal for two women to fall in love with each other or two men to fall in love with each other. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because the kind of language that I used to suit their mental age. So when I talk about role modeling and the messages we give out to our children have to be mindful, thoughtful, age appropriate. You can't talk to a 6-year-old about something that you would discuss with a 16-year-old with all these issues. But the role modeling part, you can't have double standards because kids will pull you out on that. You can't say don't abuse when you're abusing yourself. You can't talk about respect when you're laughing down at someone from a biased perspective or a judgment perspective. You can't pass biased or judgmental statements in front of your kids, because then your kids are picking up everything. And it's amazing when you're even as young as 6 and 7 how much kids absorb. They're like a sponge. They absorb everything you're saying, your body language, your tone of voice. And that's what true imprinting is called. So it's not, again, just the nurturing part. The brain is actually doing that for you as well through what we call as mirror neurons. There's a whole new concept of mirror neurons in the brain, which aids in healthy role modeling. So coming back to the bystander is not just the other kid in the class who's keeping quiet. It's also us as parents.
Right.
We become very powerful bystanders. So if we are going to shield our kids, like I started off saying, and pass comments saying boys will be boys, or turn the other way when we see certain wrongdoings in our kids, we become part of that larger bystander group. And as Varun rightly said, if more and more collectively, again, I repeat, with the school and the student body comes together to talk about what's appropriate, what is cool, because the whole concept about what is cool, what's a trend now, what needs to be conformed to, what needs to be followed. And there's a big difference which students must learn, that there's conformity and there's compliance. Compliance is the behavior. You can always choose. Conformity can also be normal, right? Because it's amazing how many amazing role models kids can have and young adults can have. It's amazing how many beautiful things we learn from our own close friends when we look back in our lives, right? So it's not about conformity only being negative, but the choice is always ours. So coming back to that inner voice, that inner intuition, and that's why I also tell parents that parenting has to be intuitive. If you know something's going wrong, act. Why wait for incidences like this to happen? Why wait for your child to really hit rock bottom, say, from a mental health perspective, or reach a state of depression or get into trouble like this, and then wake up and seek help? So intuitive parenting, and I've discussed this with a lot of parents. Lots of parents will say that I intuitively knew something was not okay. So when that inner voice comes into a parent's head to please act, there's no harm in seeking help, And I always joke with parents that when you have a toothache in your kid, in less than 24 hours, you rush him to a dentist. Whereas if you know that there's something emotional, behavioral, or psychologically wrong, I have parents who come in after even a whole year. They've not sought help when the time's right. So I just urge parents to seek help.
There's so much stigma attached to it still, unfortunately. And I love what you said about being the voice in your child's mind. And if we all look back into our childhood and our growing up years, there were things our parents said, probably we didn't agree at that point of time, but going forward, that voice did, raise its volume when we were faced with a situation. Or things we are doing today probably is an echo of that voice. I remember my son growing up, he used a swear word, and I told him that, hey, you know that our family rules say that no swear words. So he asked me a very pertinent question. He said, okay, mom, I will not use a swear word at home, but is it okay if I use it only in school? Because if I don't use the swear word in school, they call me a sissy.
Yeah.
So Varun, my question to you is how difficult it is to resist this kind of pressure, to have a voice of dissent in a group.
So this all depends on the group. And coming back to the earlier discussion we had, I feel that children become part of groups from a very young age. And they tend to stick with this group till they graduate school. Just like how I've observed many of my friends have had the same 5-6 people they confide in from grade 1 to grade 12. And that's why I feel that children and parents together need to choose a very sensitive and very smart group of friends for their child. Because I personally, I do abuse when I'm around my friends, and they do as well. But there's this one friend of mine whose name I'm not going to take. He has never abused. Until date, if we talk to him, he says, no, I'm just not going to. And I feel that over time, it's become more and more of a trend to abuse to be part of the group of the cool kids. But that's not true. You just need to be yourself. And it's not about others accepting you, but it's about you accepting yourselves. And if a group of friends do not want you around simply because you're not going to abuse, then you should be comfortable with that, and you should realize that they are not the right group of friends for you, and you should just move on to the next group, because there is that group of 7-8 people out there who don't care about whether you want to abuse. They just want to be friends with you. And I think this is more of a concept which we notice when we go abroad, because once I had gone to university just to visit for 7 days, and there were a few friends, there were a few people who I made friends with, and they asked me, do you drink? And I said, no, I'm not going to be drinking now. And they said, okay, that's cool, but when you come back next year, if you change your mind, tell us. We're just going to ask you, and if you say no, that's cool. And I feel that's a culture which, if we can bring into Indian schools, 50% of problems will be sorted, because it won't only allow children to be accepted into other groups, but it'll allow children to accept themselves for the person they want to grow up to be. And I feel that's a big step which needs to be taken.
Absolutely, very well said, Varun. And I think these are the changes we have to start bringing. You youngsters also have to start bringing this entire concept of what is cool needs to change. And I'm very glad you raised this point. So it's a great tip for youngsters who are probably watching this show. Uh, I also feel like you said that you are 18, heading to university now, and you did do a 7-day session at university. We recently had a session with 18-year-olds who are going abroad, and we had a session with them on sexual literacy. And we found that they had a lot of confusion. They had a lot of misinformation. Though all parents think that at 18, they're supposed to know it all. Now, what would be your tips to youngsters who are, seeking answers or facing confusions? Varun, my question is to you. Who should they be going to? I know you said parents, but what if their parents have never initiated these conversations with them? What do they do?
So the first step is, of course, that parents should start initiating the conversations from a young age, and they should initiate it. And just because they initiate it doesn't mean they have to talk about the entire talk at day one. As a small change comes apart in their child, they should talk about that. Because by doing this, by the time the child is 17 or 18, the topic of sex won't be a taboo topic. And hence, when the major doubts come into the child's mind, they'll be comfortable talking to the parent about it. So I feel from age 6 to 10 to 14, whether it's puberty, whether it's a small change, whether it's something the kids noticed, the parents should just bring it up, and they should talk to the children about it, no matter how uncomfortable they are. But coming back to your question as to what those kids who have not had these talks with their parents should do, first of all, it all depends on their role models and the people they surround themselves with. So if they have a friend they feel they can confide in, and only if that friend is knowledgeable, they should. But again, even their friend is just a kid of their age. And the most appropriate, even though uncomfortable solution to this question is a school counselor or a school teacher. because they are more knowledgeable than we can even imagine. Because we don't really pay attention to their entire knowledge in a classroom. But when it comes to such real life experiences, because of the amount they've noticed in a school, because they work in an environment surrounded with over 1,000 students, they might even know more than our parents. And if we are actually so confused and cannot go to our parents about something like this, a FOIA coordinator, a school counselor, or a teacher you confide in is the perfect solution, I feel.
Varun, great tips. I would have loved you to mention Untaboo's name in that also. I'm
Oh,
going to give you 30 seconds to do that.
Definitely, Untaboo is the place to go. But
Thank you, Varun. And of course, Dr. Zirak, Dr. Swati, all great resources. And there are some, so, while we pull down the internet so much, there are great resources on the internet too. You just need to find the right ones, and parents can help the kids find those right resources. Even if you cannot speak to the children, go to an expert, or if that is not a possibility, go online, find the right resources and give it to your children to go through. Help them out that way. Swati, the lot of questions and lot of, in fact, comments coming in about the fact that why can't the schools make it part of the curriculum? What do you have to say this? I know we've addressed this earlier, but as an educationist, what's your take on this? What if can it be made part of the curriculum? How difficult it is?
Actually, while this entire talk was going on, and I was just listening to Varun, I think as adults, we should take our tips from children like him. Because sometimes we get on a high horse and we become very, very, what we say, judgmental adults. I think in cases like this, the first step that we should take is listen to children like him. And secondly, I was just thinking, I think it's high time Early Childhood Association partnered with UNTABOO and a lot of other groups and came out with an actual curriculum which starts from early childhood, goes on to primary, because we also have APER now. I think it's high time we came out with it, and I'm going to reach out to you. It's very important that we help parents understand sex is not a 4-letter word. It's very important for us to make them understand that. And if we do it coming from an educational way, I think parents would be more open to it. And I'm serious, I'm not joking. I feel sex education in schools should be done by children like Varun. Because imagine how it is to listen to or knowledge about sex from aunties like us, to those children. They think, who's this auntie trying to teach us about sex, So I think it's very important that we keep it at the level at which they can talk, they can share ideas, they can be embarrassing if they need to. I think that comfort level would come when it's a sorted individual like Varun, who's talking about his experience. I think I would urge any school leaders who are listening to this webinar is, here is a sorted young man. There are many like him in your school also. Find them and make them the role models for the other children in your school, because it's so important that children today have the right role models. So I feel, Anju, decision taken today, ECA and APER will come out with a curriculum for schools with UNTABOO, and we will reach to more maximum schools through ScooNews.
I'm so glad you said this, Swati. In fact, UNTABOO does have a curriculum from grade 1 to grade 12. Very happy to tie up with ECA and early education and take it across to most schools. And it's not just about taking it to schools, to just the children in schools. It's also about educating the parents,
the
staff, and the non-teaching staff. It's a 360 perspective education that has to be done.
Absolutely.
So a great decision there. Zirak, as a mental health professional, and you're associated with schools, what are your tips over here? How can these issues which we started off with can be tackled? Do you think sex education is the way forward? Whatever you call sex education.
Anju,
are you on this too?
Yeah. So basically, exactly what Swati said and what you have said. So actually, we worked tirelessly, I think, for the last 2-3 years, as I said, on a pilot And actually, we have concluded our mental health curriculum. We've called it Mind Matters. And it is a curriculum which needs to be incorporated into any school from grades 1 to grades 12, which has actual ready-made lesson plans, but it can only be disseminated by a psychologist. Because I just feel that these terms and all can be difficult to sometimes disseminate by a classroom teacher or a homeroom teacher. So yes, it is needed to be disseminated to all kids by a counselor, but we've literally made it in a beautiful way where I can go to a grade 3 class, click on a lesson plan for, say, sex education or how to teach a child on empathy and tolerance and all the other topics we talked about. And it's ready, and it's been created by us as a group of specialists in child and adolescent mental health and psychologists to disseminate that. Because I just feel education is early awareness, is imparting knowledge, and that's the only way we can set change into motion. And like I'm again repeating, if sometimes families and parents are not those healthy role models out there, we as educationists can come into play, join hands, and create these beautiful curriculums together, which is ready-made already. And I'm happy to share it with whoever would love to know more about it. But again, I repeat, it's not just, as Swati said, about sex being a four-letter word. In fact, that's just one little dot in the things that we need to teach our kids. Like I said, for me, it is conversing with kids about gender equality, respecting women, boundaries, consent. What does true tolerance and acceptance mean? How does one become more compassionate and create more empathy in a child who's even as young as 6? Or talking about safety, right? I mean, today our kids in our city and our growing concerns are not safe anymore, from social media, from cyber crimes. So what are the appropriate behaviors? What is not? And normalizing conversations.
Even relationships, Zirak, for that matter,
Absolutely.
Dealing with the dynamics of relationships or dealing with rejection. Very, very important subjects too, and these are all part of sex education.
So, Swati also mentioned that so many parents also sometimes, or schools, are resistant. Like, they're like, how can you, oh my God, in grade 10, how can you talk to kids about, say, self-harm and self-cutting? Now, it's giving them ideas. Now, there was a whole research for years. Initially, as psychologists, we were trained not to ask a patient or a client openly whether you're suicidal, because they said if you ask them that question, it would give them the idea or the thoughts to attempt suicide. The whole world has changed its philosophy. Now they're saying, as therapists, the minute you feel that there's perhaps in a child or a young adult who's harboring, say, suicidal ideas or thoughts, you have to ask them directly. And just by asking them directly, you could perhaps save a life. So when you're bringing all this into the classroom, you're normalizing so many terminologies, you're normalizing so many conversations, and you're not doing it through these fancy PPTs and giving them information in a dry way. You're doing it through experiential learning. You're giving YouTube videos to them. You're asking them, like for a whole week, they'll be celebrating an anti-bullying week, for example. For 2 days over, they'll have a poster competition on preventing sexual harassment, for example. So there's so many innovative ways now that we can impart this knowledge to our youth, that it's absolutely mandatory to start. And what better time now, right? I mean, the whole world is saying that post-COVID, mental health is going to reach a proportion of a crisis. So this is the next generation. I mean, they're calling it the COVID generation. So let's all start, let's all join hands so we can effect change.
Absolutely. And you're very right when you say that don't make it a simple blackboard classroom learning. Make it interesting, involve the kids in it. In fact, a play that we have on puberty and safety is a musical play. It's a complete laugh riot. And we've seen amazing results with the kids and the parents with that. So yes, we need to disrupt this sex education, so to say, and bring it to the forefront. In fact, a case in point I would like to mention here is a research which was done in Kenya. The sexual assault statistics in Kenya stated that 1 in 4 boys thought that it is okay to rape a girl if she was taken on an expensive date or wore a mini skirt or she was out alone at night. So they initiated this sex education and consent programs with the kids. A year later, the results were amazing. There was a drop in rape cases. The girls could prevent sexual abuse on their own, and boys started intervening to prevent sexual abuse and assault on girls. So it's really, really heartwarming when we see researches like this. It's heartwarming to see that we have a solution. Some great things got thrown up in this discussion. The educational activist Swati that we have here, who disrupted the market by her Gupta Vats video years back before we even got into, nobody was talking about this, feels that sex education is the way forward. We just need to coin a different word. Zirak spoke about being the voice in your child's head. And also parents, don't be the it's not parents' perspective, a very fresh perspective, a youth perspective, that parents have to be the source of information for the children. Parents need to be the source of information for the children, and parents, please open up conversations with them very early in life. They are looking for relatable role models. Be one of those. And my perspective as a sex educator, and also as a mom of 2 young adult boys, I feel that you cannot monitor and you cannot protect your children 24/7 from exposure. The only thing that you can do is have conversations and more conversations. So break those walls of silence, untaboo conversations on these topics. Let's stop finger pointing and passing the buck. If each one of us takes on this onus, we'll be able to together raise a very positively informed, safe, and responsible generation. Thank you, Swati, Zirak, Varun, again for being a part of this important conversation. I would now like to invite Ravi back to join us for his closing comments, and very happy to take on any more questions that we have here.
Thank you, Anju, for a very powerful session today. Yesterday, me and Swati Ben were speaking that, I think by far, we had the greatest traction and engagement from a lot of attendees for our yesterday's webinar. I think we have broke that record, Swati Ben. This is by far one of the most amazing sessions. And I think, a lot of people in the chat box are saying, what an apt selection of speakers. And someone also wrote that, who's this Bollywood star? Zirak, that was for you. So I think a lot of parents and teachers, many of you must be thinking, how do we take sex education to parents? How do we share what Varun shared, what Zirak shared, what Anju and Swati ma'am shared? A very, very simple solution to start with would be by sharing this session from ScooNews FB page on your timeline. Also on your school's Facebook page. And let all those in your friend list and followers of your page see this video. I think by this, you will be doing a great, great service to the nation. Do that now. Go on Facebook page of ScooNews and share this video of this webinar widely. Let all people watch this. And once again, brilliant presentation, Anju. Thank you for your moderation. Happy that we partnered for this webinar. And I so look forward to partner with UNTABOO. And Swati ma'am, nothing new for you. Sorry, from my side. You were amazing as always. And I think, that's what a lot of attendees are also writing in the chat box. Zirak, you made a lot of sense when I first heard you in Mumbai at Empower Conference alongside Ms. Nija Bilda. And great points today, Zirak. I think you should go deep in the chat and read what people wrote for you. And my colleague Vinay will send you the chat link and everything after this webinar. Thank you so much, Doc, and really honored to be on the same screen with all these stalwarts. Varun, the man of the hour. Take my suggestion, don't worry about your future. You have just become a keynote speaker and many will be happy to pay you to speak. Bravo, my boy. More power to you and may your tribe grow. And I think, this particular video, I'm also going to share with my daughter and my son tonight. I think, there are more than 6 or 7 cousins and my family friends who are watching this from Facebook. So all of you, I'm going to share the link on our WhatsApp groups and we are going to make this viral. And by tomorrow, I promise all of you, you'll have hundreds of thousands of views on the Facebook video. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. What an amazing. Zirak, thank you. Swati Ben, thank you very much. Anju, you rock. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Varun, there are some questions for you here. Would you like to answer them? Ravi, do we have more time?
I think, there is some bandwidth issue because the recording is going on the live cloud. And I think, we may, but what I suggest all of these people to kind of, copy these questions and post it on Facebook page, the live stream. And Varun and you all could kind of, go there and spend some time over there and answer all these things because we might just get over the board with the recording and the space that we have on cloud for this webinar.
Sure.
So that's the end of this webinar. And thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you and see you on the other
Thank you,
side real
everyone.
soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Anju. See you soon, Swati. Thank you, Varun. You were awesome.
Thank you for this opportunity, ma'am. Thank you for all your views. It was a great